In this video, we will be discussing about what is there inside a computer. In any general computer, there are three main parts: a CPU, memory, and input-output devices. The size of a computer may be from a small IC, like a microcontroller, to a big PC. In any case, we can see these three important parts. Memory is an important feature of a computer. The more memory a computer has, the more powerful it is. A bit is the smallest unit of memory. It can have values 0 or 1. A nibble is defined as 4 bits. A byte is defined as 8 bits. A word is defined as 16 bits or 2 bytes. A double word is defined as 32 bits. Most modern computers come with gigabytes and terabytes of memory. So a kilobyte is defined as 1024 bytes. That is 2 raised to 10 bytes. A megabyte is 1024 kilobytes. A gigabyte is 1024 megabytes. A terabyte is 1024 gigabytes. There are two main kinds of memory inside a computer. They are the RAM and the ROM. RAM stands for random access memory. It is also called as read or write memory. It is used by the computer for temporary storage of programs that is running. So when a program is being run by the CPU or the computer, RAM is used. And the data inside a RAM is lost when the computer is turned off. So RAM is called a volatile memory. ROM contains programs and information essential to the operation of a computer. So we can't afford to lose it when the power is somehow lost. So the information inside a ROM should be permanent. So a ROM should be non-volatile memory, and it is. A ROM is non-volatile memory. The function of a CPU is to execute the information stored in memory. By information stored in memory, we refer to the program that is stored inside ROM. The function of input-output devices such as the keyboard and video monitor is to provide a means to communicate with the CPU. So the input-output devices basically communicate with the CPU. The CPU is connected to memory and input-output through strips of wire called buses. In this diagram, a CPU is shown and the other units are the two different memories and different other input-output devices. The CPU is connected to the different devices with the help of wires. These wires are called buses. And these units other than the CPU are generally called as peripherals. Buses are set of wires that carry information from place to place. There are namely three different buses inside a computer: address bus, data bus, and control bus. An address bus is meant to carry address of a device. By a device, we mean that a memory or an input-output device. For a device to be recognized by a CPU, it must be given an address, and that address should be unique. No two devices can have the same address. The CPU puts the address on the address bus and the decoding circuitry finds the device. CPU is giving the address through address bus, and there is a decoding circuitry inside the CPU that recognizes the device. The more address buses available inside a CPU, the larger the number of devices that can be addressed. The number of locations with which a CPU can communicate is always equal to 2 raised to x, where x is the address lines. So a CPU with 24 address lines can address 2 raised to 24 locations or 16 megabytes of addressable memory. 2 raised to 24 is 16 megabytes. That is 2 raised to 20 into 2 raised to 4. 2 raised to 20 means megabytes and 2 raised to 4 is 16. So 2 raised to 24 is 16 megabytes of memory. The address bus is unidirectional as discussed. The CPU sends the address, but the address is never carried back to the CPU. So address is only flowing from the CPU to the decoding circuitry. So address bus is unidirectional. A databus is responsible for the actual data transfer between the CPU and the other devices. The CPU either gets data from the device or sends data to it. So data buses should be bidirectional. The more data buses available, the better the CPU. The average size of data bus in CPUs varies between 8 and 64. Inside an 8051 microcontroller, the size of data bus is 8. And in an Intel i5 microprocessor, the size of database is 64 bits. We have said that a CPU is the brain of a computer. Why is it called so? A CPU has a component called ALU. ALU stands for Arithmetic and Logic Unit. It performs all the arithmetic and logic functions. And inside CPU, we can see some registers like a register A, B, C, D, and another register called a flag register, another register called a program counter, another register called instruction register, and another unit called instruction decoder, timing and control. The CPU uses registers to store information temporarily. That means the information stored temporarily means these registers are of RAM type. Registers inside the CPU can be 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit or even the 64-bit depending on the CPU. In general, the more and bigger the registers, the better the CPU. ALU stands for Arithmetic Logic Unit. It is responsible for all the arithmetic and logic functions performed by the CPU. And then there is another register called a program counter. A program counter stores the address of the next instruction that is to be executed by the CPU. Then the next instruction to be executed means the next instruction is inside the program in ROM. So the ROM has memory locations where the program is stored. The address of these memory locations are stored by the program counter. So the program counter stores the address of the next instruction that is to be executed. So that means the program counter is responsible for the flow of the program. And then there is an instruction decoder. Its function is to help CPU what is to be done when a certain instruction is received.